Welcome back, everyone, to a new reaction series, one that has been requested for a long time, and this goes all the way back 9 years. This is before I even had my first YouTube channel. This is from Extra History. It's the Sengoku Jidai. Now, from time to time, I like to dive into topics that I don't know much about, and that's typically true when we're talking about East Asian history. Anything related to Japan, China, Southeast Asia, Korea. I just don't know that much, and it doesn't make it any less important. It just means that as a Westerner, as an American, it's not something that we learn a lot about. And so I'm excited to find out what I can learn. I'm excited to learn from some of you who this is something that you're interested in. As I often do with Extra History series, I'm going to be doing 2 episodes each day in the reaction. And if you are a member or a patron, you'll get to see the next episode a day in advance. So when each episode goes live, which today is 1 and 2, at the conclusion of this, you'll be able to see 3 and 4 through a link through your membership or Patreon if you're on those. So even if you sign up at just like whatever the cheapest one is, I'm not even sure how much that is right now. You can do that. So with that said, the link is in the description to take you to the first episode so you can check it out without my commentary. Extra History always does a great job. Let's go ahead and dive into parts 1 and 2.
Sengoku Jidai, the Warring States period. The time we think of when we think of samurai. A time of self-sacrifice, bravery, treachery, and betrayal. A time when the fate of great clans could turn in a day, and peasants could rise up to become regent of all Japan. A time filled with personalities like Miyamoto Musashi, Oda Nobunaga, Hattori Hanzo, and of course, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Names that live on in our culture even today.
Yeah.
It's one of the most seminal periods in Japanese history, and it'll be the topic of our next few videos. In 1467, a few decades before Columbus stumbled onto the shores of the Bahamas, and 15 years after the light of Rome was extinguished for the
I was going to say, let's set the stage. What's going on in Europe at this time? 1453 is the fall of Constantinople. It's the very last, as they're saying, vestiges of what was left of the Roman Empire. You're 25 years before Columbus goes and lands in the Caribbean. You are talking about right in the middle of the Wars of the Roses in England. This is a very interesting time all around the world.
Last time, at the fall of Constantinople, Japan erupted into a great civil war. This war, the Onin War, rocked all of Japan. It started as a dynastic dispute between 2 great clans, the Hosokawa and the Yamana, but it soon spiraled out of their control, devastating both of these clans and shattering any semblance of unity within Japan.
How interesting is it that a war that ends up gripping an entire nation, I mean, nation's the wrong word because it wasn't really a nation the way we understand it today, but an entire land, an entire people, starts between warring clans. Is that really any different than things like the Wars of the Roses going on at the same time in England? It's really just warring clans within the same family that engulfs the entire nation.
As central authority collapsed, regional warlords, called daimyo, fought to assert their power over whatever portion of the country they could grab, fracturing Japan into 100 feuding fiefdoms, and plunging the
Which
whole...
is what makes this such a fun thing to turn into games, which is why we've had so many video games, PC games in particular, from this time period, because it makes for an interesting thing when you have all these warlords and all these options. It's very replayable.
Whole country into chaos and 100 years of ceaseless war. But we're going to pick up the story in the province of Mikawa, the home of the Matsudaira, in 1548. This province and this whole region is central to our story, because Kyoto, the capital of Japan at the time, and traditionally the home of the emperor and the shogun, is just a short distance away. And whoever controls the shogun, at least in theory, controls Japan. But in Mikawa, the Matsudaira are surrounded by 2 larger, much more powerful clans, the Oda to the west, and the Imigawa to the east. It was just a matter of time until one of these larger clans attacked the Matsudaira, looking to claim their territory in this age of might makes right. 1548 is that year.
So this is a year after Henry VIII dies in England. This is a time when the Western European powers are starting to explore now to the west. They're also starting to make their way around Africa. And you're going to start getting very soon Western connections happening in Japan while all of this is going on. But when you have all of these warring clans, then it's about alliances. It's about balance of power. It's about who can I get on my side? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. But then once we defeat that enemy, do we turn on each other? It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
The Oda forces start marching into Matsudaira territory. The defenses collapse. Without help, the Matsudaira are clearly lost, so the head of the Matsudaira clan turns to the Imagawa. He asks them for an alliance, for help to defend his lands, but an alliance won't come without a price. The Imagawa clan offer to help on the condition that he send them his eldest son as a hostage. Having
Pretty typical. This is something you did in every part of the world, holding the hostage, a nobleman of some kind as hostage to guarantee cooperation. Pretty common.
The head of the Matsudaira family agrees, but as his retainers are taking his son to the Imagawa territory, they're ambushed. Somebody tipped off the Oda. The boy is kidnapped and spirited away to Oda lands. The Oda write to the Matsudaira and tell them that if they don't turn traitor and end their alliance with the Imagawa, they'll kill the boy. And here's where the head of the Matsudaira pulls one of the most brilliant maneuvers of the Sengoku Jidai. Now, I don't know if he did it as a brilliant stratagem or if he was just doing it out of stoic samurai bravado, but still, brilliant. He writes back and says to them something roughly like, "Kill my son. In doing so, you will show the Imagawa just how committed to our alliance I am." What a catch-20.
So this is it's a calculated risk, right? I mean, on one hand, maybe he really does mean this, but on the other, it's, I dare you to kill my son. Do it and see what happens. See how people turn on you. See how it backfires. Wonder if they do it.
Me too. Don't kill my son, I win. Kill my son, I win more. And boy does it work. The Oda don't kill the boy. In fact, they have no idea what to do with him now. So he just sits around at a local temple for several years.
It worked.
Thus, in a world where hostages are slaughtered left and right, this boy is left unharmed until, at last, an opportunity comes for the Oda to get what little use out of him they can. The old head of the Oda has died, and the Oda forces are in a bit of disarray. The Imagawa see their opportunity and put to siege the castle that houses the new head of the Oda clan while he's relatively undefended. Then they offer the Oda a deal. We'll let you live if you hand over the castle we're sieging and give us back the Matsudaira boy you stole from us years ago. The Oda jump at the deal because, hey, good riddance. The head of the Matsudaira clan has also just recently died, making this boy, in name at least, the new head of the clan.
So I'm curious to know exactly what the nature of siege warfare, like what were these castles like in Japan? I mean, because obviously we have a very particular idea of castles when we think of like Western Europe, we think of England, Scotland, and places like that, and we think of siege warfare in a certain way. What was it like in Japan? I'm actually a little curious about this. I'm going to dive into this topic a little bit. All right, so did a little bit of brief looking at this, and I was reading some about it, and here are some examples of some of the castles we're dealing with at this time period. It looks like they made heavy use of the terrain, which is not uncommon. You have Motte and Bailey castles in England, for example, early on. Here's a kind of a diorama of one of the castles here. But it sounds like, as far as siege warfare goes, they made heavy use of things like crossbows to actually try and kill the soldiers who manned the castles, much more than trying to bring down the walls of the castles themselves. But some of you probably know this time period much better than I do. Let me know in the comments section. Let all of us know in the comments section. What was the nature of siege warfare like during this time period?
The Imagawa see having him as a hostage as a good way of assuring that the Matsudaira will remain on their side, and with any luck, they can raise him to be a staunch ally of the Imagawa by the time he returns home at the age of 15. In 1556, the boy is now officially a man by the standards of the time, and he returns to Mikawa to rule the province in his own right. The alliance with the Imagawa is going well. The Oda are feeling the pressure of the combined forces of the Matsudaira and the Imagawa, and now it is time for this teenage daimyo to take up the sword himself and lead the Matsudaira forces. His capacity for war is quickly confirmed as he storms through Oda lands, reducing the hill forts along the border. But even as his armies are raising the Matsudaira flag over these fortified hills, the Imagawa forces are doing even better, cutting deep swaths into the Oda lands. The end is near. The Imagawa forces are going to march on to the final great Oda castle, destroy their last major rival, and sweep on to take Kyoto, with the loyal Matsudaira at their side. The Imagawa forces are resting in a gorge, partying, celebrating, and regathering their strength for the final siege of this castle. The Matsudaira forces are camped a bit further off at one of the border forts they've recently taken. Meanwhile, the last of the Oda forces are in their castle. They are preparing for one last desperate defense, but their leader, the 26-year-old Oda Nobunaga, has other plans. His advisors counsel him to hide in the castle, or perhaps to surrender without a fight. But he turns to them and he says, "Do you really want to spend your entire lives praying for longevity? We were born in order to die. Whoever's with me, come to the battlefield tomorrow morning. Whoever's not, just stay wherever you are and watch me win it."
When you're not afraid to die, there's a lot you can accomplish on a battlefield. There's a scene in Band of Brothers where they try to illustrate this a little bit. You have this scene where Lieutenant Spears is talking, I think, to Private Blythe. And he basically tells him, you just need to realize that you're already dead. And once you accept that you're already dead, then you can function as a soldier is supposed to function. Now, I've thankfully never been in the situation where I've had to figure out what that looks like. But that makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Fear... bravery is not the absence of fear. It's being afraid and then doing it anyway. And once you kind of come to that place of acceptance of the cost, okay, I'm very likely to die, and I accept that. Then you can function. Then you can do what you need to do.
He knows that all defending the castle will do is buy him maybe a few more days, but he has no interest in losing more slowly. He'd rather take the 1,000-to-1 shot at victory. So he gathers up the few hundred men he has in his castle and begins riding toward the Imagawa force, an army that numbers in the tens of thousands. He rallies men to his banner as he winds through the countryside, mustering a force of about 2,500 souls not afraid to die on this suicide charge he's proposing.
So my understanding is that we're dealing with a lot of conscripts and peasants. These aren't thousands and thousands of professional soldiers in these armies. And so you can have a lot of variety in the quality of the fighting from one unit to the next, depending on how committed to the cause they are, depending on how well trained they are. And this is why you can see in certain wars and certain time periods a very small force defeat a very large force based on their training, based on their motivation, based on their leadership.
But his information network is still good,
Ninjas!
And he knows that the Imagawa forces are resting in a gorge. What's more, it's a gorge he knows well from when he was a boy. He has a plan. It may be a desperate one, perhaps even a foolhardy one, but it is a plan. He has no intention of charging onto the spears of his enemies just to die with glory. When they near the gorge where his enemies are resting, Oda Nobunaga does something that seems like madness with his force of 2,500 facing up against an army of 25,000. He splits up his men. But he's playing to win here, and he knows that he's only got one shot, so he sends a division of 500 men up to a fortified temple on a nearby hill. These 500 men are not there to fight, but rather to create a decoy army. They take flags and banners and litter them atop the hill so that the men in the gorge think that Nobunaga's entire force has taken up a defensive position there.
So then what are they going to do, flee, or are they going to charge up the hill?
Hardly a threat for them to worry about. After all, it's just one more hill fort to take. But Oda Nobunaga has another plan. He knows how to sneak around the gorge and enter it from a place the Imagawa will never suspect. As he begins to lead his forces around their stealthy path, a storm rolls in. The rain begins to pour. The clouds and the water whipping through the wind mask his approach. No one in the gorge sees them until it's too late. The men in the gorge have been drinking. Some are in tents. Many have dispersed to find shelter from the rain. And then, just as the clouds part and the rain stops, Oda Nobunaga's men come charging into the valley. It's mayhem. It's a slaughter. The unprepared and drunken men scatter or fall where they stand. The attack is so sudden that the lord of the Imagawa doesn't even realize it's an attack. He thinks it's just a ruckus caused by the peasants in his army, so he doesn't move from the play he's watching until a soldier bursts into his tent.
This is the problem. You can be so overwhelmingly favored to win, you can get complacent. And that's what the British did in the late months of 1776. They've got Washington's army down to a couple of thousand men whose enlistments are about to run out. And they've got tens of thousands of men. They could get across the river and crush Washington, but they get complacent. They spread out and they put 1,000 guys here and 1,000 guys there and 2,000 here and 2,000 there. And they spread out all over New Jersey, and Washington's able to launch a surprise attack, kind of like this, where he's got a fairly even force against the Hessians at Trenton. And then he not only bags the whole Hessian army at Trenton without losing a single man killed in the battle. He lost a couple from weather, but that was it. Then he manages to win a couple other battles in the aftermath when the British finally wake up a little bit, and then he sneaks back across the river.
At first he thinks it's one of his men, but the soldier thrusts a spear at him. He whips out his katana at the last moment and slices the spear in two, but too late. Another man rushes in and lops off his head. With that, with such surprise and such panic, with the complete loss of their leadership, the Imagawa army evaporates. Thousands are cut down as they flee. Thousands more just quietly return to their farms back in the Imagawa lands. But this force
These aren't professional soldiers. They're like, I'm out. I wasn't fighting for... The guy I was fighting for is dead. I wasn't gaining anything from this anyway. I'm out.
Everything. The Imagawa thought they were going all the way to Kyoto with this army, so they brought everything they had. The weakened Imagawa are now just carrion for their hungry neighbors. All of those clans around them descend on their land and carve it up between them. Even one of their former allies. The young leader of the Matsudaira understood which way the wind was blowing. As he watched the routing Imagawa forces stream past his captured hill fort, he decided that it was time to meet with the young lord of the Oda.
So now the enemy of my enemy is my friend no longer applies. The enemy of my enemy has been wiped out. Maybe I should be friends with my enemy.
Oda Nobunaga, perhaps due to his own lack of forces, or perhaps due to the Matsudaira boy's nearly mythical ability to dodge death, agreed to work with him rather than slaughter his forces outright, as was often done to the losing side during the Sengoku Jidai. The young Matsudaira leader agreed to be not perhaps a vassal, but more a junior partner in wherever Nobunaga's adventures may lead him. This young man who will one day be known far and wide, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Join us for the next...
All right, let's dive into part 2.
Welcome back to the Sengoku Jidai. Last time we left off with Oda Nobunaga ascendant after his surprising victory over the Imagawa, and young Tokugawa Ieyasu aligning himself and his clan with the victorious Oda. Now we enter a period of consolidation, as Nobunaga tries to strengthen his holdings and plan for his own march on Kyoto. And this is where the alliance with Tokugawa becomes so important. You see, to the east of Owari, the home province of the Oda, were 3 great clans, the Hojo, the Takeda, and the Uesugi, all of whom were arguably more powerful than the Oda. So why didn't one of these clans march west and steamroll everything between them and Kyoto? Well, because every time one of them would start to, one of the others would invade their territory. But now that Oda Nobunaga had the Tokugawa as allies...
This is what I was saying earlier. I mean, this is not where you just have 2 warring nations where you just fight against each other. You've got all this system of alliances going on, and everybody is just biding their time, and as soon as you give them an opening, they're going to take it. So you have to kind of watch your back while you're watching your front. This is complicated stuff.
His eastern flank was secure. He could look west with impunity, or at least with a pretty big buffer between him and anyone who wanted to stop him. So this just leaves 2 clans to the west between Oda and Kyoto. These were the Azai and the Saito. But remember, right now, Oda Nobunaga isn't grasping for the prize of Kyoto. He's trying to consolidate the gains he's just made. So he marries...
And this shows intelligence. This shows wisdom on his part. Even more than just intelligence. This is him understanding how this works. Don't get greedy. Don't go grab the big prize. Set yourself up for long-term success.
Off his sister to the Lord of the Azai, bringing them into the family, and hopefully ensuring their friendship. At the same time, he opens overtures with his father-in-law, the old daimyo of the Saito, Saito Dosan, a crafty ex-merchant who managed to raise himself up to ruling a whole province.
So now you're getting a guy that knows money, that knows finance, that can help you bankroll this stuff.
San is on the verge of making a deal with the Oda when he's trapped and killed by his own son, Saito Yoshitatsu, who then rejects Oda Nobunaga's overtures of peace. Looks like it's back to war then.
Dude, that's hardcore. I'm so committed to not making this deal that I'll kill my own father to prevent it from happening.
And now it's time to bring in our third major actor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Actually, wait, no. Before we go on, we gotta talk about names. Because, you see, at this point, Toyotomi Hideyoshi isn't actually being called Toyotomi Hideyoshi yet, and Tokugawa Ieyasu isn't called Tokugawa Ieyasu yet either. And basically everybody in this story changes their name like 13 times because it seems to be a thing at the time to demand that everybody call you by increasingly cooler names the stronger you got, which,
That's amazing.
yeah, it's kind of awesome, but it also gets extremely confusing. So we're basically just going to ignore it and just call everybody by the names history remembers them
That's
as.
fair.
The only really important one to remember is that Tokugawa Ieyasu was called Matsudaira Motoyasu, and like 6 other things before that, before he became Tokugawa.
That samurai, homie, my man. And my understanding is, and I'm guessing it was the case at this time as well, that when we're reading a Japanese name, the name we read first would be the last name. So Tokugawa Ieyasu, so his Tokugawa would be his surname.
Tokugawa Ieyasu, and that he was the leader of the Matsudaira clan from the last episode, which by the end of this episode he will rename to the Tokugawa. You see why I'm not bothering with all these name changes? Anyway, back to Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Here is a guy who really embodies the changing fortunes of the age. He began life as a peasant. When he was born, he wasn't even cool enough to get 2 names, but then he joined the Oda forces and became a sandal bearer. I kid you not, he was the guy whose job it was to carry Oda Nobunaga's shoes around. But apparently he was really good at it. So good that he got promoted to being one of the guys who oversaw repairing castles, and from there it was off to the races. In 1561, Oda Nobunaga invades the Saito lands. For 3 years he's rebuffed, never quite able to take the mountain castle of Inabayama that the Saito use as their headquarters.
So why does this matter? Because in a world in which there's not a lot of upward mobility, the fact that somebody can rise from being a peasant to being someone of great importance, that gives motivation to others that they can do the same thing. When you don't have the ability to rise too far outside your station, what motivation is there to try hard, really?
But then Oda brings in Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Toyotomi's specialty was administration and diplomacy. He was a decent enough warrior, I guess, but that's not what Oda needed right now. If all it was going to take to beat the Saito was a good general and some courage, Oda Nobunaga would have gotten the job done himself already. So instead of attacking the Saito head-on again, Toyotomi applies his special brand of skills. One by one, through bribes, appeals, and threats, Toyotomi turns almost all of Saito's retainers against them.
I love this because it's not just brute force. It's showing that there's more to this than just the militaristic society. There's intelligence, there's cunning, there's strategy here.
With nearly all of their forces defecting, the Oda conquest of the Saito is a near certainty. But there's still the impregnable fortress of Inabayama to deal with. So long as it stands, the Oda will never safely hold the land. They need a jumping-off point, a place to gather their troops and store their supplies, a place to safely maintain a siege from, and a place to retreat to if things go poorly. Their last several incursions fell apart because they lacked such a place. So Oda Nobunaga orders Toyotomi Hideyoshi to build one, right at the foot of Inabayama. Now, you would think that right under the arrows of the enemy, it would be impossible to build such a fortification. But not for Toyotomi Hideyoshi. According to legend, he built the place overnight. Now, we can be pretty sure that he didn't actually build that place overnight, but getting himself a legend like that probably means he built it pretty darn fast.
Yeah.
He certainly did it fast enough that he got it built before the Saito could really muster an effective attack against it. As our story rolls forward, I think it's worth pondering why these 3 men with their particular talents were able to unify Japan when for 100 years all who came before them had failed. And the conquest of the Saito gives us some good hints, I think. But back to Inabayama. Once Toyotomi Hideyoshi's fortress is in place, Oda Nobunaga brings his forces up to put the Saito's castle under siege. But Hideyoshi's not done. He has one more trick up his sleeve. He's been talking to the local villagers, and he knows of a path up the back of the mountain. A path...
Again, this is all part of intelligence, right? Intelligence gathering, knowing the terrain that you're attacking, because the defenders got a distinct advantage, as we saw earlier in the first episode, where they used their knowledge of the battlefield to be able to defeat a force that outnumbered them 10-1. So getting that inside track, getting that inside knowledge can make all the difference.
Path that would let him and a small handful of men slip into the castle undetected. He tells Nobunaga of his plan, and they agree. He is to pick his men and head out. In the dead of night, they scale the side of the mountain, and just before dawn, leap over its walls. They quickly rush to set fire to the storehouses and the powder magazine. The magazine explodes in this great gout of flame. The defenders inside are totally disoriented. Outside the walls, they see thousands of men advancing on them. They see the treacherous banners of those they thought to be their allies slowly creeping up the hill, and then bang, the castle erupts.
Wow, this is like a major shock to the system. You've been betrayed. Things are blowing up.
Some men throw down their weapons right on the spot. Others leave the castle walls and race to the courtyard, thinking a full-scale attack is going on. In the midst of this confusion, Toyotomi Hideyoshi and his small band of men seize the gate and throw open the doors. It's not long before the castle has fallen. This is the end of the Saito. When the campaign is done, Nobunaga makes Toyotomi a lord for his services and appoints him to rule over 3 prefectures of the former Saito's land. With the Saito out of the way, Oda Nobunaga plans at last to march to Kyoto. But how could he justify it? What legal reason did he have? If he simply marched in as a conqueror, it might unify other clans against him. It might even weaken the support of some of his retainers. But then, in 1568, a 31-year-old man turned up on his doorstep claiming to be Ashikaga Yoshiaki, displaced from Kyoto when his brother, the shogun, was murdered. This man asks Nobunaga to cast out the pretenders to the shogunate and reinstate him as the true and rightful shogun of Japan. What an opportunity. Nobunaga, with all the reverence and humility due to his station, says that of course he'll help. He wants...
So my question is, and I'm sure we're going to get the answer, my question is, clearly this guy's probably not who he's saying he is. Does he know that? I'm guessing he does. How many times in history have we seen people take advantage of something that, in hindsight, it should have been obvious was flimsy at best? You know, there are plenty of examples of that in history. The Gulf of Tonkin for the U.S. and Vietnam is an example that comes to mind. Some people talk about the Reichstag fire in the 1930s in Germany. Even Germany invading Poland was on the pretext of the Polish sent people across and raided us in the night, so we're just defending ourselves.
It's nothing more than justice for Yoshiaki and to see the Ashikaga shogunate restored. Of course he'll help him retake Kyoto, fingers crossed. Then Nobunaga makes it known far and wide. He's marching to Kyoto to restore the shogun, and anybody who tries to stop him is acting against the rightful will of the shogun and will be destroyed.
There you go. Now you've got that righteous cause. It's that casus belli. It's that don't you dare oppose me because I'm doing the right thing. And you don't want to be on the wrong side of history, do you? And by the time people realize what has happened, it'll be too late. And as we've seen throughout history, the facts don't even matter. If you can sell the lie good enough and you can get out in front of things, by the time people even realize what the truth is, it's too late.
Not much you can say against that. And so, with a somewhat naive heir to the shogunate in tow, Oda's forces sweep west, smashing the few clans that stand in their way, and by the year's end, they're in Kyoto. And there we will leave our story for today. Everything's great, Oda has Kyoto, the, quote, rightful shogun has been restored, Hideyoshi is managing the Saito lands, and Ieyasu is holding down the fort in the east.
All right, we'll wrap it up right there. We'll come back tomorrow with parts 3 and 4, unless you're a patron or a member, in which case you can see it right now. Check out the link that I posted that's available to you guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.